Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Peach Pundit podcast. My name is Scott. I'm joined this week by Buzz Brockway. Hey, Buzz, did you have a good Christmas?
I had a great Christmas. How about you?
It was wonderful. We stayed at home and did pretty much nothing. So anytime I can get that to happen, that's a good thing. Yeah, I started a nonprofit this year, as you know. You're on the board of it. It's called Eternal Vigilance Action.
Yep.
And right around the 20th of the year, I ran out of work. So I'm still employed, but I just didn't have anything to do. So rest of the year off.
That's one of the great things about working for yourself. When the task, when the to-do list is done, you're good.
I'm good until legislative session starts. So so it's been, for the first time in a really, really long time, I had nothing to do for multiple days in a row. And I had forgotten what that felt like. I felt like I was back in high school, frankly.
Yeah.
So we're without Jason today. Jason is sitting currently at an auto shop, babysitting his car. Oh, what a wonderful way to blow out the new year with car troubles. We're thinking
2021 getting one last thing in under the wire. He's here in spirit with
I've worn my favorite t-shirt from 2021, the Jason Piehead t-shirt. You can get this on Etsy for $24.99 for shipping and handling.
I'm wearing a cool one too. I love my ACC champion, Georgia Tech basketball, one of the highlights of 2021. So
yeah, there you go. And also you're wearing your Braves cap. So there's that.
Another highlight of 2021.
It was also a very, very, very busy year for Georgia politics, right?
Indeed.
Starting back in January 6th, and all the insurrections.
The fifth, right?
Well, the 5th, I guess we had an election here, and then
it was a week of horrors.
It was a really bad start to 2021, a harbinger of bad things to come for our state and our politics here. And the biggest story right out of the bat in January was we lost two U.S. Senate races.
Dos.
Yeah. No bueno, as the kids may say.
Bueno.
What's your take there?
Well, I think it's. I remember after the election last year. And then we realized, the world realized we were going to have two runoffs for these two seats, and that was going to decide control of the United States Senate. I did a whole lot of interviews, and with media. It was crazy. Scott, I did interview with Swiss television, German television, Russian television. You name all sorts of entities here in the United States as well. It was really wild.
They couldn't get enough of that beautiful Buzz Brockway face.
I guess so.
Swiss TV?
Yeah.
What did they want to know?
Oh, they really all want to know the same thing, really. It was, and this kind of ties in with another one of our top topics is, that if you remember, that was that time, a year ago this time, Georgia was just engulfed in Trump's claims that the election was stolen, and Lynn Wood and all these people running around telling people not to go vote, and Trump holding rallies and spending 5 minutes touting the candidates and an hour and a half bashing Kemp and Raffensperger and everybody else under the sun, and sending the subtle signal to go stay home, which we've talked about all of that repeatedly. But I think, and so as I was doing these interviews, that's really what they wanted to know. Are these things going to dampen Republican turnout? And I said, yeah, I think they will.
And they did.
I'm really worried about that. Leading up to this, guys, we got to quit doing this. And we've hit on that. We beat that horse until it's dead. But
well, the thing that stood out to me were two things from the campaigns. Number one, when Jon Ossoff pointed to an empty podium across the stage because David Perdue wouldn't come debate him a second time, because the first time Jon Ossoff, who was not a polished or pretty politician, and is not a capable politician, when he pointed across that stage and he talked about how the guy wouldn't even come talk about his policies, and how David Perdue gave Jon Ossoff that time for free to give an unabated, unrebutted message for his plans for that office. I thought it was political negligence at best. It was arrogant and condescending at worst. And he ended up losing that seat because he couldn't bring himself to find it in him to debate this kid who had no political experience.
And you remember too, Shane Hazel, who's now the Libertarian running for governor, was a Libertarian running for the Senate in that race.
Right.
I don't remember how many votes he got. Not that many, but when you're in a really tight race, you remember Shane Hazel asked Perdue to come on to his podcast and talk with him, and Shane was very open about it. I'm trying to decide who I'm going to vote for and urge my supporters who to vote for. And Perdue would not go on that podcast. Now, maybe
I think he had initially agreed to go on and backed out, which was even more cowardly.
Now, look, I mean, how many votes did that sway? I don't know. But when you're in a really tight race, right? These things add up. And there have been politicians who have skipped debates before. And I don't know, I'm not making the claim that was the decisive thing, but it started to be this accumulation of things, right? And then you added on to that, and Kelly Loeffler suffered the same thing. They had both been under investigation, but then, no action was taken about their stock trades. But it allowed Warnock and Ossoff to paint them as elitists, as wealthy people who were in there profiting off of their position for themselves and not looking out for the people of Georgia. And that was essentially the message coming from Ossoff and Warnock, that they were going to go up to Washington and do that, and these two others do not. So bad.
Yeah. It was one of the worst run campaigns in the history of me following Georgia politics. I can't remember a worse campaign. I can't. I mean, I can't come up with any campaign that rivals how bad the David Perdue campaign was. He lost that seat because of him and a combination of our next biggest story, which was the Kraken.
Yeah.
Right. People, we had Sidney Powell and Lynn Wood out there telling people, I wouldn't go vote. I think that's what Lynn Wood actually said, make them fix the machines before you go vote.
Yeah. I think the exact line, if I remember, Scott, and I'm sure our listeners can correct us, the exact line was, do not vote unless they replace the voting machines, as if that was going to happen anytime, but certainly as if it was going to happen in between the November election and the January runoff.
Right. And she had made all these Sidney Powell in particular had made all these incredibly wild claims. She claimed that there was there were Hugo Chavez connections.
Yes.
That who has been dead for years at this point, but apparently was in control of our elections. That there was another company from Latin America that was actually involved. That she made claims that our voting database went overseas.
Smart Tech, right? Wasn't that
Smart Tech? Smartmatic.
Apparently, our machines don't even use.
Yeah, Smartmatic. Smartmatic had nothing to do with Georgia elections. She made all these claims, and it frothed up all this disinformation. I'm not even calling it misinformation, disinformation. And she filed what she called the Kraken lawsuit, and it was dismissed. And now she's being sued for defamation and libel. And she actually, in her court filings for the lawsuit that has been filed against her, she says, well, you shouldn't have taken me seriously when I said those things.
Yeah. No reasonable person would have taken her seriously. Well, we didn't, but
right. No reasonable person. Right. So that was the exact phraseology, Buzz. No reasonable person would have taken me seriously.
Right.
When I said those things, which meant that her target audience were the unreasonable people, which meant that if you believed her, you were an unreasonable person in her mind, right? She was calling you unreasonable if you believed what she was telling you.
Yeah. It just went on. And I saw her, there's some event coming up in January that's billed as a religious event to begin the process of reclaiming America, and Sidney Powell is going to be there. Well,
it's not a religious event then. It can't possibly be. I don't see how any religious institution would welcome in somebody who would blatantly tell her audience, well, you shouldn't have believed me when I told you that.
Yeah.
I mean, who says those types of things? Who says, you just shouldn't believe me when I say that? I mean, who are you to believe me when I tell you something? I mean, you're just not that. Come on, you're not that stupid, are you, to believe me? That's what she was saying the whole time.
Yeah.
And so with the lawsuit gets thrown out, but then the disinformation remains, right? And so we're still fighting these claims of the these false claims of that the election was stolen, because a lot of it came from Sidney Powell. And, and her lawsuit was thrown out. Not one single claim was proven. We had other claims of fraud that have consistently been tossed. Every single time somebody comes forward with one of these claims, it gets disproven. And it doesn't matter if it's disproven to a lot of people. They don't care that it was disproven. In their mind, it's still true.
Yeah.
Like they can't get off of that the claim was made, and they can't move forward with fact and differentiate fact from fiction. And so we continue to find ourselves in this situation. And along comes Stacey Abrams, which is the third really big story of the year, right? Stacey Abrams played coy for a really long time. She hung around other states on a book tour. She wrote a children's book during this time. She continued to
sold the rights to a couple of her romance novels to Hollywood to make some movies. So
I hope that she uses that money to pay her back taxes.
I think that's been taken care of.
Has it?
Yeah, because she's been making bank these last few years. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, she has been, because she started her organization to drive Democrat turnout, and she is a legitimate threat. She is way better of a politician than Jon Ossoff or even Raphael Warnock. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Yeah.
And so she decides, finally, you and I had come to a conclusion that there's no way she's getting in, right? She had gone to Virginia recently to campaign for Terry McAuliffe and said some of the, endorsed some of the things that he said that were outrageous on the campaign trail.
Oh, yeah.
Around, the thing that really made Terry McAuliffe famous, or infamous, if you will, during his gubernatorial campaign this last time out. This was the Democrat that was running for governor in Virginia. He said that parents shouldn't have a say in what their kids learn in the public schools, that it should be left up to bureaucrats and teachers to figure that out. And experts, as if parents aren't experts in their own kids. And she was there during that time, and she was pushing for Terry McAuliffe to reclaim the governor's mansion over Glenn Youngkin. And so I think it was
even worse than that, Scott. Remember, Terry McAuliffe is known for, and he continued this. I can't remember if he said it when she was there. But he definitely endorsed that her election was stolen from her, and that she was the rightful governor of Georgia. So hard to throw stones at. We throw stones at Donald Trump all the time for his claims about the election, but Stacey Abrams has long held this and made it almost an article of faith in the Democratic Party that the election, that Brian Kemp stole the election from her. But also Terry McAuliffe even goes back to the year 2000 and says that George Bush was, remember, that was the whole phrase, selected, not elected. That's what the accusations that Democrats lobbied at George W. And McAuliffe was repeating those things during this election. So, it's, I think I like your phrase, Scott. Stacey Abrams, blazed the trail that Donald Trump blasted through.
Yeah. And that's the truth. These election has been stolen claims were not unique to Donald Trump. He did not originate that narrative. That narrative lies squarely at the feet of Stacey Abrams.
Yep.
Stacey Abrams clearly made claims that were verifiably false. And again, on the Democrat side, people believed what she said. It doesn't matter that it was disproven. The claims was still made, and it's only the claim that matters to some people.
Yeah.
They don't care that she's been proven to be a liar on that topic. they still believe that the election was stolen from her and that Brian Kemp should never have been governor.
Yeah. And look, we I think we've talked about this before. There's a big difference, her claiming that suppression, that the election was stolen via various nebulous voter suppression techniques. That does not necessarily discourage Democratic turnout, because you can still say to those people, that's why we need you to stand in line, even if it is 5 hours. That's why we need, you continue to fight to overcome suppression. The problem that Trump has done, and why it has so damaged the Republican Party, and why it helped lead to the defeat of the two Republican incumbent senators here. If the election's rigged, no amount of standing in line is going to unrig it. If the machines are, if voting by mail is fraudulent in and of itself, if the machines are hackable at any moment by shadowy foreign agents, then why in the heck would you bother to go vote if you're a true believer in those sorts of things?
And I think it's important at this point to point out some of the things that have been put in place to overcome the potentiality of voter fraud, which is also one of our big stories of the year. And that was our election law with SB 202 that created lots of controversy. But specifically, even before then, there were things put in place before the last presidential election with the new machines, risk limiting audits, where they did a hand count, and it wasn't even a risk limiting audit. It was a full blown audit where they did a full hand count of every ballot cast in the state for president of the United States. And the numbers came out virtually the same. It was within a handful. And when you're talking statewide, that's incredible. And that hand count, by the way, occurred under the supervision of Republicans and Democrats in a bipartisan manner. It was done by Republicans and Democrats in your local election office in Georgia. And so
in Germany.
So one of the claims the Kraken lawsuit made about, that the machines flipped votes, that was one of the claims, that the machines were flipping votes, was verified false by the hand count that was done across the state by Republicans and Democrats together in environments that were in your local communities. That happened locally, wherever you are.
And look, and even going back a step further back from that, Scott, because you and I were there when various pieces of legislation along these lines, you and I were both big proponents of risk limiting audits and et cetera. But also, there was a lot of debate around what sorts of machines and voting system we should purchase. And, that's still worthy of debate. But the machines, the ballot marking devices, there's a piece of paper, right? There's a piece of paper that when you go to that hand count, that's what they're using. Right. So that's something new that was not there in previous Georgia elections. We did not have, other than absentee ballots, there weren't pieces of paper that you could look at and see how an individual had voted.
Right.
So that's new as well. So
and that was
another level of security in the elections.
The verifiability aspect of Georgia elections was absolutely vital. The new machines do provide that. There are some people who are concerned about barcodes being on there, but when they did the hand count, they were doing it with human eyes on the human readable text. And so it verified that the barcode matched the text. And so there is no there when it comes to whether or not the barcode was bad, because we hand counted every single ballot in Georgia.
Right.
And the elections came out the same, but we did find through that process that there were some things that needed to be addressed. Number one, before the pandemic allowed for emergency rules, there were no obligations. There was no ability. There was no legality to a drop box being used to collect absentee ballots in Georgia. If the legislature had not addressed that when the emergency rules expired earlier this year, there would be zero drop boxes throughout Georgia. And so SB 202 allows for specifically one in every county, and then put some security measures around it. It has to be guarded and videotaped, and it has to be inside available during business hours, those types of things. So there are some restrictions on it, which became a bit of a point of contention between Republicans and Democrats.
Right.
And it renewed from the Democrats a great deal of rhetoric around efforts to suppress voter turnout. There, everybody has a voter drop box at the end of their driveway. It's called their mailbox. Not everybody's going to be using a drop box. The vast majority of votes that are cast through absentee or by mail, they're not done through drop boxes. I understand the benefit of it and the desire to use something where it's going to be, you are dropping it in, you're not relying on your mail carrier. Because I can tell you here in Cherokee County, the mail service sucks. So I would never trust my absentee ballot to the drop box at the end of my driveway.
Right.
I would want to actually take it in if I could. But that kind of negates the whole need for an absentee ballot to begin with, because I would be taking it to a place where there'd be 4 voting machines and I could just vote right there. Right.
Yeah.
But there were other things in SB 202, and we talked about those ad nauseum all summer long, because when the bill passed, what happened, Buzz?
There was quite a bit of controversy, and I think political pressure was brought by people. LeBron James, other
President
activists.
Biden.
President Biden made a number of inflammatory, incorrect statements, which to my knowledge, he has not walked back or corrected the record. And of course, leading the charge was Stacey Abrams with her Fair Fight Action, organization, and herself. So a number of our big corporations then, who had, from what I understand, had been at the table and were aware of the bill before it was passed, had suddenly reversed course and started attacking the bill after getting some pressure. And then, of course, the Major League Baseball, that is, decided to send the All-Star game away from Atlanta to Denver, where the population is north of 90% white folk.
Not only that, but also
Georgia's diversity here in Georgia.
Yeah, and the All-Star game leaves. The president of the United States actually said the words, "They should move it." Yeah, Stacey Abrams can claim that she didn't actually say those direct words, but the impact of what she had said around not directly calling for boycotts, but kind of encouraging it. I mean, that's, I think, empowered people like Joe Biden to directly say, and look, you should move it. And Joe Biden absolutely did say, yes, the Major League Baseball should move the All-Star game.
And Abrams has been one, the left has done this for a long time, making corporations into activists on their behalf to carry out their agenda. It gets back to one of Robert Conquest's laws of politics, that any organization that is not explicitly conservative will eventually become liberal. And that's what's happened with all these big corporations, because that's where the pressure comes from. They're the ones who are going to make the noise. The left are the ones who are going to make the noise and threaten boycotts and not and try to wreak economic harm on folks. So you can't create that sort of atmosphere and then be upset when they do something that you don't particularly, take a course of action that you don't particularly like because it harms your electoral chances in the future. But I mean, rest assured, that's going to be a huge issue in the governor's race next year.
Yeah, absolutely will be, because and maybe a little bit of edge has come off of that particular blade, because the Braves brought the World Series back to Atlanta. The only bad thing was that they won in Houston in 6 games as opposed to winning in 5 here in Atlanta, where we had 3 full World Series games. And so it was as if the Braves said, all right, I'll see your All-Star game and I'll take 3 World Series games from you, chumps.
Yep. But what was cool was, even though it was in Houston, if you go back, there's video of this on YouTube. The loyal Braves fans who were there in Houston did their part and booed Rob Manfred as he was there presiding over the So Rob Manfred still got booed as he handed us the.
Rob Manfred was going to get booed in Houston anyway because they feel like they got shafted with trash can gate over there. That they weren't treated fairly during that situation. Which, by the way, if you're a Houston Astros fan and that's your take, you're wrong.
I think they can complain that. I think they do have a legitimate complaint that they were scapegoated when others were let off the hook.
Right.
They were not the only ones.
And they were just the most blatantly stupid
Boston,
about it.
The Mets, you know, come on.
Boston especially, yeah.
They received the harshest punishment, but I mean, look, you remember, Scott, the season after that, all that came to light. How many times were Astros batters plunked by opposing teams? A lot.
Especially in New York.
Yeah.
Especially in New York. Because the Yankees lost a chance at a World Series.
And the Dodgers got their revenge too. They plunked them a few times. And
yeah. But one of the World Series heroes was Tyler Matzek, who we've talked about quite a bit on this podcast because of me. Frankly, I'm just going to say it. The two of you were not Matzek believers. I turned you into Matzek. Well, Tyler Matzek turned you into Matzek believers.
Yes,
but I told you that he was the guy that you should be.
He was that guy.
He was that guy. And he had a hot take the other day on Twitter. I'm going to read his tweet. It said, after Major League Baseball took the All-Star game away from the Atlanta fans, it felt great to bring the World Series and the Commissioner's Trophy to Atlanta. Baseball is a place where people can come together and cheer for something. It shouldn't be used as something to drive people apart.
Amen.
And you know how the left reacted to that, right? Well, how do you feel about the voting law, Tyler Matzek? Do you support the Republicans about their oppressive and repressive voting law?
Yeah.
It was wrong for them to pass that bill, Tyler Matzek. Who are you to say that it was wrong to take the All-Star game out? And that's not really what he's saying.
No.
What he's saying was, even though Major League Baseball made that decision, that as a player for the Braves, it was great to bring the World Series back to Atlanta for the fans.
Yep.
And that's a real thing, right? Yep. I mean, everybody we talked about this before. Yep. And this is a rewind review episode of the Peach Pundit podcast. We talked about how you and I, virtually every person we knew, equated justice with us getting the World Series here in Atlanta.
Absolutely.
That was poetic justice.
Yep.
That Atlanta would make the World Series, win the World Series.
Yep.
And stick it to Rob Manfred right in his face and say, we're the world champions, and you can't take that away, regardless of what that is. Yep. Of whatever happens in politics. We are still here. We're here for our fans. We did something for our fans, and it was great, and we're proud of that. Yep. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that at all.
Absolutely.
So Tyler Matzek, I know you don't listen, but if you do, thumbs up to you, brother. Keep on keeping on. We love you, brother. We do. I think
that inning, I forget what inning it was, but that inning when he struck out Albert Pujols, Mookie Betts, and one other guy, another dangerous Dodgers hitter, which their whole lineup was pretty dangerous. That was one of the gutsiest outings.
Yeah, I remember texting with you guys, with you and Jason Pye.
Yep.
During that game. And I think he walked the first batter in that game. And Jason texts, "Where's your hero now?" And then he strikes out the rest of them. I said, "Right freaking there."
Look, I mean, Pujols is not the Pujols of 10 years ago.
No,
the dude is still pretty daggum awesome.
Look,
and
if
knows
your
what to do with a fastball that's out of place.
He's the machine, right? That's his nickname, the machine. If your heart rate didn't go up because it was freaking Albert Pujols, you're not paying attention to baseball history. Yep. And other players have come up in a moment just like that, also wearing Dodgers uniforms, like Kirk Gibson, who was on his last leg and couldn't run,
literally,
and still hit a walk-off home run.
Yep.
And you put somebody, I mean, you see a legend come up to the plate in that type of scenario. Baseball legends are written from scenarios like that. And anyway, I've got goosebumps thinking about it.
I know. And Mookie Betts, Mookie Betts is one of the best players in baseball right now.
Yeah, he is.
A clutch player in his own right.
Yeah. It's all around 5-tool player, excellent ball player. So World Series comes back to Atlanta. We'll trade you an all-star game for World Series.
Absolutely.
Anytime, Major League Baseball, anytime you want to make that trade, we'll make that trade. But the fifth and final big story of the year, sadly, was the Christmas present that David Perdue gave to Stacey Abrams.
Yes.
In the form of his candidacy for the nomination for the Republican nomination for governor of Georgia.
Yep.
And so he announced that he would be running for the nomination to run against Brian Kemp. So we have a Perdue versus Kemp showdown. And I've made my feelings very clear on this. So you go.
Yeah, I'm with you, Scott. I think Brian Kemp has earned the right to be reelected. He has governed during some very difficult times. Nobody expected that this pandemic would happen. Nobody in 2018 was saying, "Oh, I know what's going to happen." 2020 is going to be consumed by this virus that just won't go away. And he's navigated us through that. I think he deserves re-election just on that alone. But there are also other things that conservatives would cheer. Most notably the signing of the heartbeat bill, which all of that issue now rests with the Supreme Court, and we'll see what happens there. But I think this is part of this silly civil war that Donald Trump has initiated within the Republican Party. And it's. I hope it doesn't cost us. I hope that a Republican will continue to hold the governor's mansion. I hope it's Brian Kemp, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think this is definitely one of the biggest stories of the year. I definitely think it was done for egotistical reasons and not because David Perdue would make a better governor. He's not. He's just. We talked earlier about how pitiful his campaign was for U.S. Senate, right?
Mm-hmm. And I think, Scott, I think, Brian Kemp, working with a legislative body when you're the executive and working with a legislative body, like a governor has to do, requires a lot of interpersonal skills, and Brian Kemp has that.
He does.
We've talked about it before. I've mentioned it when I was running for Secretary of State in 2018. Everywhere I went in the state, I ran into people who had been hunting with Brian Kemp, who, local leaders, every one of them in practically every city in this state knew Brian Kemp from his time as Secretary of State, because he had endeavored to develop a relationship with them and assist them as his, whenever they needed something from the Secretary of State's office. Brian Kemp was there, yeah, and even to this day, I've got his cell phone number. I can text him. I try not to abuse it.
Right, me too.
You try not to text him all the time because he's the governor.
Right,
but you can text him, and guess what? You'll get a text back.
Right. It might be emojis, but you'll get a text back.
Yeah, there will be emojis in it.
but that's this. Listen, the personal skills aspect of being a governor cannot be understated because, I'm going to point this out for people who think that I'm just a Kemp guy, and I'm not, because when Kemp was Secretary of State, you will recall, I was one of his loudest critics, especially because he resisted moving to paper ballots.
Yeah.
And he was very staunchly for the status quo in the system because his elections officials didn't want to change. So he was giving voice to the elections officials. But me as an elected official, I was like, oh, I'm not okay with that. And so we fought over whether or not we should move to paper ballots. Ultimately, I won that debate. But he and I were on the opposite sides initially. He got on board eventually. But we fought. And we fought in public, right? We took shots at each other publicly, right? In the streets of, we were in the
political
newspaper
streets of Atlanta,
dueling quotes against one another. I mean, we were on opposite sides of that, right? Yeah. When he gets to be elected governor, he calls me in with a couple other guys. It wasn't just me, but he's like, I want to work with you. How do I work with you? And that meant a lot to me.
Yeah.
And then he gave me a cell phone number, and every single time I've reached out to him, he has responded. And I don't abuse it. I'm not on the phone with him once a month even. It's very rare that I don't talk to him. It's just text. But he does respond, and it's usually keep chopping type of thing. Yes. Message and response, which is his catchphrase, which is great, whatever. It's on brand. But
there are thousands and thousands of people, tens of thousands maybe across this state who have that.
Right. If you think about me's in particular in the story about, hey, he can win me over.
Yeah.
And the reason why he has won me over is because number one, he'll listen when I bring him ideas that he doesn't agree with. Even if he doesn't agree with me, he is cordial, and he has the ability to tell me he doesn't agree with me. Yeah. I remember one time I said something to him in a private one-to-one conversation. He called me up while he was still campaigning. He invited me for a cup of coffee, and we went and sat down. Now, he didn't owe it to me because at that point, he and I were not friends at all. Right. But he's like, I want to earn your support. Yeah. And I was like, all right, I'm listening. And so we talked about some of the things that he would be doing differently as opposed to Governor Deal, who was really well respected, but didn't want to work with guys like you or I very often, because we were too far to the right for him on a lot of issues. Mm-hmm. So here's Brian Kemp, and he wants to work with us.
Yeah.
And he wants our input. And when he had his healthcare waiver thing, there were 8 or 9 of us he brought in together that were kind of the conservative core of the House. And he was like, I want your buy-in on this. And he went through it with us step by step, policy item by policy item. And it was like no other governor had ever done that. Yeah, with the guys who were considered the conservative core.
And you were there. My term didn't overlap. I was out of the legislature by the time Governor Kemp took in, but I remember watching, and our friend and former colleague David Stover, I never thought I'd hear him utter these words, but he went to the well of the House and he said, I'm going to support this, talking about the attempt, the waiver authority that the legislature was giving the governor to seek medical 1115 and 1332 healthcare waivers, and said, I still have a few issues with this, but I trust the governor.
And, David Stover trusts the governor. What? What?
I almost fell out of my chair when I saw it.
This is really inside baseball, right? You got a couple old House reps telling people who are listening to this, like, that is a freaking amazing that David Stover would say, I trust the governor in sequence. Oh my God, my mind is blown up. I still didn't vote for that bill.
Speaks to that meeting that you had, right?
Yeah, because Stover was in there with us, right? And
I think I haven't talked to David about that since then, but Kemp did what he said he was going to do. They sought the kinds of waivers that they said they were going to seek,
right?
And he didn't go hog wild and do all kinds of other stuff that there was no bait and switch going on with that whole thing. But
right, so those are the 5 top stories. Number 1, we lost 2 U.S. Senate seats. Mm-hmm. Number 2, the election claims, false election claims, have been proven false over and over and over again, specifically the Kraken lawsuit. Number 3, Stacey's in. Oh, boy. Number 4, Perdue challenging Brian Kemp for the nomination to be governor of Georgia. And number 5, the election law / All-Star Game / World Series. Those are your top 5 political stories from our point of view here at Peach Pundit. Yes. Looking forward now.
Yes.
We've looked back enough, Buzz. Number 1 prediction. What do you think is going to happen in 2022?
Well, I've been reading a lot about this. Is kind of a not necessarily Georgia related, but I think we'll, every president gets tested in foreign policy at some point, and there are a couple of brewing things out there. I just have a feeling in things that I've read that something is going to. One of these things, hopefully not both of these things, but one of these things are going to explode. The Russians have long wanted access to ports that Ukraine has. They are amassing troops on the border. They're making all sorts of noise. They've long desired that. There are a lot of Russian nationals that live in Ukraine. So it's a messy situation. But that would be bad if Russia were to invade Ukraine, that would be a foreign policy headache, more than a headache. That would be a real problem for the Biden administration. Then on the other side of the globe, you've got China, which is continuing to flex its muscle, continuing to thumb its nose at the rest of the world on all sorts of things. Really has never had been made to account for its disinformation and lies as COVID around the beginning of COVID-19 and all that sort of stuff. But they continue to make noise and harass Taiwan, and they too have long seen that Taiwan, or thought that Taiwan is theirs. And it's even saying, that China has made it to the point where NBC won't even, during the coverage of the Olympics, would not even refer to Taiwan as Taiwan. So they continue to flex their muscle, and I just have a bad feeling that one of those two things is going to become a real problem for President Biden next year.
Yeah, recently a couple things about. Well, I'll go in reverse order, but Bob Costas has had some very interesting things to say. Longtime NBC sports announcer, a longtime commentator for the Olympics. The host of the Olympics for NBC for years and years and years. Been very critical about China and their human rights abuses and how they crack down on free speech and the media while there's Olympics there. So I doubt Bob Costas will be going to China for the Olympics.
Yep. And look, I guess we should mention there will be no diplomats from the United States going to the Beijing Winter Olympics, which is just coming up, just in February.
Right.
That's, maybe not as far as they should go, but it's something. And
well, I mean, and then going back also to the Ukraine, and Neil Bortz had a tweet. He said, "The cat here is Putin, and the ball of yarn is Joe Biden." And he's just smacking him around and having a good time. He's just enjoying it. He's playing around with him. And that would be really difficult. But Biden has been saber rattling about that recently. He has made some very strong statements of if Russia does something stupid, we're going to do something stupid too.
And he has reiterated. President Biden has reiterated our support for Taiwan and their right to be an independent nation, and that we would defend them if need be. And I hope. So
you're predicting what exactly?
Well, I'm thinking one of those two things is, I guess the more likely one, I suppose, would be Russia invading Ukraine.
I can see it for sure. My number one prediction for 2022 is that Kemp wins. Wherever he's involved, he's going to win. And we've talked about it. His record he's earned that. I am not certain that David Perdue is ever going to get back onto the Team Kemp train because Donald Trump won't allow it. But I think in spite of the odds, because Stacey Abrams can be so tightly connected to the Terry McAuliffe and the crazy things he said during his race, I think she can be painted that way, and she can be beaten. And I think that enough Republicans are going to turn out for Brian Kemp for him to win the nomination because his record has just been stellar. And there are a bunch of Republicans, and I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to sugarcoat. There are a bunch of Republicans who are out for revenge on behalf of Donald Trump. And I get it, but you're wrong. You need to get over it. You need to go vote for the guy who can actually do the job. And what we have been telling you this whole time, if you haven't been listening, is that he's really good at the job. And he's done a great job. And just because one guy is mad at him over some things that were outside of his control, and regardless of what you think or believe, he couldn't do anything about what was being said. Every time there's been a claim, it has been investigated. The only time it hasn't is when David Schaefer came forward and said, "I have a witness," and he won't produce the witness. Right. So I don't know how many days. It's been over 90 days since David Schaefer has said that I have a witness that he will not produce. But produce the witness, Mr. Schaefer. Produce it. We're still waiting. But until then, the governor has given Republicans every reason to vote for him for re-election. So I think he wins.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, I think he defeats Perdue and Abrams. And I think, some of it's going to be, that's going to be troublesome for Abrams is, as you mentioned, tying it to Terry McAuliffe and to Joe Biden. But it's hard to see how, with Omicron raging and already there, schools and the Chicago Teachers Union is saying we're not coming, we're not going to come back. Other schools, Clayton County is just announced they're going to be virtual again. So all of these things are going to continue on. And how do you get a handle on inflation in time to help to rescue the Democrats in the midterm?
They're not, because they keep pumping cash into
exactly, and they want to again. And yeah, look, Joe Manchin has apparently killed the Build Back Better bill, but they're going to continue to try to bring that back in some form or another, and they're going to continue to spend massive amounts of money that's going to continue to harm us with inflation. And so, maybe that all turns around in time to rescue them for the midterms, but that's all going to factor into depressing votes for Stacey Abrams. And that's, I think a friend of mine turned me around on that. I was thinking, that Abrams was just going to cakewalk in, but my friend pointed out that there's all of this stuff that's going to hang over. And then, of course, look, when we could talk for a long time about this, I'm sure we will in coming days, but Hispanics are leaving the Democratic Party for a number of reasons, one of which is they're sick and tired of being called Latinx. How many times do they have to say that? And you're starting to see that word disappear, but one
thing the left is good at is altering their vocabulary. So if they're told it's not politically correct to use the phraseology Latinx, they'll stop. They will. I mean, they'll turn on a dime. Their ability for doublespeak is incredible. So, what's another prediction you have for 2022?
Well, I guess I would mention that we've talked a lot about the Secretary of State's race and about those things, but I think that probably Jody Hice. Well, I'll go ahead and predict it. Jody Hice is going to be the Republican nominee for Secretary of State, but I think it's going to be closer than people think. I think there's a lot of folks who think that Brad Raffensperger is dead in the water, and he might be, but
I think that.
I think it's going to be closer. So I'm going to go ahead and predict that Hice beats Raffensperger, but in a runoff, not the slam dunk that.
Well, because there are other candidates in the race that have done well. A total of
four, really.
Right? There's a guy, TJ
Hudson. Yeah, he's been campaigning for a while. I may have the judge wrong, but am I right that magistrate?
Yes.
Judges oversee
probate
judges. Yeah, they're the ones who technically oversee elections. So he is a probate judge and knows a little bit about elections because of that. So
quite a bit, actually. And I haven't heard him speak. I've seen some of his stuff online, and it seems like he'd be a serious candidate. Yeah. It seems like that, right? We'll see. And of course, he did very well at a straw poll recently in one of the parties down south.
Yeah. So you got Hice, Raffensperger, Hudson, and then of course David Bell Isle, who lost to Raffensperger in 2018 in a runoff.
But did well. I mean, he did well last time out. But his campaign is shambles this time around. I mean, David Bell's campaign is. I feel like it's talking down to me in a way that I feel like the condescension is trying to make me feel like I'm just a stupid person, right? I just can't understand these concepts. So he has put out a series of parody music videos. Brad went down to Georgia, and then today he had a fake list of New Year's resolutions that he apparently had stolen from Brad Raffensperger, and it was just ridiculous, So the campaign for David Bell Isle is based on idiocy and is stupid, and I'm over it. I have been cordial about I have not waded into the Secretary of State's race. My best friend works over there. I love him to death, but my prediction is that Raffensperger is not Secretary of State. He's going to lose. I don't know if that's I don't think he makes it out of the primary. And even if he does make it out of the primary, he's not going to get reelected. So I think, we have to look seriously at the other candidates. It's unfortunate for my friend who works over there, but the reality is politically, I think he has no shot, just none. And, and Jason, I know, feels very strongly about some of his hiring decisions that he's made. And I share those concerns about specific individuals who are on staff. But that being said, I don't think there's any way Brad Raffensperger is the nominee. But I'm so tired of the Baby Belle campaign. The stupidity hurts, man. It hurts. I don't even know why I open up these emails. I read them and I want that time back. You should be making donations to me for reading your stupid stuff in your emails.
Can reverse campaign contributions, huh?
Yeah, you owe me money for making none of this makes any. It's like that scene out of Happy Gilmore. These are the stupidest things anybody's ever said anywhere. We're all stupider for having read it.
I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
May God have mercy on your soul. You have one more. Looks like a senatorial race.
Since we're making predictions,
yeah.
I'll go ahead and say this is not a prediction I like to make, but I think it's I just don't see any way that Herschel Walker defeats Raphael Warnock.
Oh, I do see it. I'll tell you why. Do not underestimate the power of celebrity.
Well, that's sure. You make a point, but the reason what concerns me is, we still haven't seen. We've talked on this podcast numerous times. I had thought that maybe it was too early for Herschel to have to be out there and making speeches and making announcements about policies and stuff. But that window's closing, and he's still not out there, and he's still not doing a whole lot. And the calendar's going to turn, and he's going to have to be out there. And it's hard for me to, I don't know, it's hard for me to see that I hope I'm wrong. I guess this is the pessimist in me that's predicting this, but I have a hard time because I don't think Warnock either has really made people mad.
No, but the DC machine, the swamp, the spending, the inability to get goods.
He's voted for all that. So,
right.
But here's the problem. Here's what Herschel's going to have to do. He's got to separate himself from Trump and not talk about whatever Trump wants to talk about, and talk about that stuff that you just outlined.
I think he will.
You can make the case that Warnock he's just lockstep gone along with all of that. But, is Herschel an effective messenger for that? I'm not sold yet.
Well, listen, I think
Glenn Youngkin, that's assuming that Herschel's the nominee, right? So,
well, I think it's
in that race too. But
I'll make the prediction that Herschel Walker will be the nominee, and I don't think it will be close because of power of celebrity.
Yeah,
I don't know that he'll be the most qualified. I don't think he would be the most qualified person to be the nominee. But what I think is qualified and what the Republican voting base think are qualified are really two different things. I have found often, and so I don't think he'll be the most qualified, but I do think he'll be the nominee. I don't think it will be close. I think he wins without a runoff. And when he gets into the race with Warnock, I think if he follows the Glenn Youngkin model, which is acknowledge that Donald Trump is his friend, but not lean on him, and then turn around and focus on the issues that make him different.
Yeah,
because that's what Youngkin did beautifully in Virginia.
Yeah, absolutely.
Was he basically said, Donald Trump's over there, but let me tell you about why I should be governor.
Yeah.
And
it'll right. And you're exactly right. It will be harder though, for a couple of reasons. First of all, Donald Trump's heavily invested in Georgia. He wants what he wants. He's got pretty much an entire slate of candidates.
But we're talking about, we're not talking about primary at this point. We're talking about the general election.
But, yes, but Youngkin was able to, excuse me. Youngkin was able to divorce himself from the national scene and say, I'm talking about what I'm going to do for Virginians.
Mm-hmm.
Herschel's in a federal race.
Yeah.
It's hard not to talk about the national thing. And
let's not confuse. No.
And then Trump comes up in that because it's all, Trump's trying to lay the groundwork for whether he's going to run in 2024.
Yeah. Okay.
And Georgia's the proving ground.
Let's not conflate the national debate with Donald Trump, for a general election. That's just not the case. What the path for Herschel and victory, and the reason why I'm confident that he can beat Warnock, is because when he goes and looks at the policy issues, the Build Better Back Better Act, all the spending that's led to this inflation, the inability to get workers to fill in even basic jobs, the lack of goods and supply chain issues, the fact that your local Wingstop closes at 8 p.m. as opposed to midnight, that your Walmart's not open 24 hours a day anymore, that you have Waffle Houses putting on their menus that we may not have what you want, and we may have to close certain hours of the day. So as people, this is not normal American life. And as people begin to reject that, Herschel Walker can come in and say, under Raphael Warnock, this is what you've got. And if you make me U.S. Senator, I will work on policies that will keep Waffle House and Walmart open so that you can buy what you want when you want at a price that you can afford.
Well, Scott, the question for me comes down to, can Herschel do that? What is his campaign people? Are they more beholden to Trump, or are they saying we will do what it takes to win?
I think
that's what it takes to win. That's my concern about all this. Can Herschel be that messenger? Because you're exactly right. There is a gazillion things to run on here that you can lay at the feet of Raphael Warnock on how he's voted wrong and how he believes the wrong things politically, and that his political philosophy is taking this country in the wrong direction. That is all there, and that there's a gold mine there.
I believe a house plant.
You're a candidate who was, less like David Perdue, recruited. Donald Trump twisted his arm for months before he finally. He was more coy than Stacey Abrams was. That's my concern. Is he in this race because he believes this stuff and he wants to make it happen, or is he doing this more like David Perdue? My good pal Donald Trump talked me into this, and then if your heart's not 110% in it, then that's going to lead you to decisions that will ultimately, what I fear, take you down and make you incapable of defeating Raphael Warnock.
Well, it will be seen. That's why we call them predictions. We don't know what will happen, but I am not always right, but I'm never in doubt. Okay, so me neither. And I believe, I do have a certain level of doubt, but I do think that Herschel could win. I think he can be taught.
He can compare Herschel's first video announcing his campaign and David Perdue's. Herschel was, man, I lived the American dream, is my paraphrasing of it.
Yeah.
I grew up in a small town in Georgia. I got to live my dreams, and I want you to as well, and that's why I'm running. That's the perfect message, and that he should continue. If he does that, then I have hope for him.
Yeah, I think he can. I think a house plant could do it. I really do. I don't think this is hard. Well, but this is the only thing that would make me concerned is, does he have anybody on his staff that thinks like me, that can turn it to an issues-based campaign and model the Glenn Young model and bring that to Georgia, because it's a winning model and it should be applied here easily.
And I think, a counterfactual to what I'm saying is that I think Herschel, by his nature, I don't know, I've never met the man, right? But just having observed him for 40 years as a person of great respect and influence in this state, I think it seems to me that he personally is an optimistic, positive type person. Yeah. And so if it's like that old campaign thing, let Reagan be Reagan. If they'll let Herschel be Herschel,
they'll let Goldwater be Goldwater.
Yeah. If
that didn't work out.
If his campaign handlers and whatnot will let him be that kind of person, then I think he can run the campaign that you're talking about, Scott. And please prove me wrong, Herschel.
Please prove me right, Herschel. Please. All right, it's 3:30. That means the Alabama Cincinnati game's kicking off, and we're going. So
should we toss out some? I mean, this will be dated, but should we toss out some quick predictions on the two national semifinal games? Or
UGA wins over Alabama.
Okay, UGA is going to win it all. That's your prediction.
Yeah, I just predicted UGA over Alabama in the CFP.
Well, I get myself in so much trouble with UGA fans. I won't argue with that. I think, yeah, the question will be, can Kirby Smart jump over that Alabama hurdle? That's not many people have.
If he can get his quarterback situation straight, the answer to that question will be yes. If he continues to Kirby Smart that stuff up,
yeah,
the answer will be no.
Yes.
He needs to learn. He just needs to turn over the quarterback position to somebody else because he's terrible at it. But other than that, go Dogs.
I can't say those words, but I
All right. Thank you for listening.
For 2 great games.
Listen, 2021 was a mixed bag for me. I had a lot of loss and started something new. Jason's not here for me to thank him, but Jason helped me start Eternal Vigilance Action. Buzz is now on the board of that. Jason helped me start that by introducing me to people who could help fund that work. We're going to be doing great work in 2022. Hope you'll all be paying attention. But since May, this has been my full-time job, working as a nonprofit for these campaigns, for these issues that were important to me when I was in the legislature. So all the issues that I worked on there, we're going to continue to work on. We've been funded to do that through the end of 2022 so far. Thank you, Buzz. Thank you, Jason, both for helping me get that off the ground. Without you guys, we wouldn't be here. And I just want to say thank you and many blessings into 2022.
Thanks, and I'm glad you're there, and I'm glad you're doing that. We're aligned on the issues that you're working on, and I'll just say, 2021 was a mixed bag for me as well, some good and some bad. I'm grateful that I get to work at the Georgia Center for Opportunity, get to work on issues that I'm passionate and care about, and we had a lot of successes at our organization this year, and I'm looking forward to 2022 because I think we're going to have there's some irons that we've had in the fire that are really cooking, and I think 2022 is going to be a good year for that as well. So
awesome! Thank you guys. Happy New Year to every one of you. Be safe, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yep.